the Patriot Hour. It's Wednesday, February 13th, 2019. Just making sure. All right, folks, if you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. Please subscribe, like, share, comment after the video. Take a look in the description box. Whatever we go over will be down below in the description box. Turn this down a little bit. All right, a few different things to go over here. Make sure you're subscribed. Again, if you're new, all the videos and live streams we do, you'll get alerted. In the description box is the the link to the other Patriot Hour backup channel that we are back to talking about. That way, if we go live, you guys can be part of that. All right, we got an article we're going to jump in here. Comes from CNN, actually. It was just on when I logged on. I saw it. I just wanted to say Representative Adam Kinzinger deployed to active duty on the border. Representative Adam Kinzinger is deployed to the southern border with the Air Force National Guard, according to a statement by his communications director. Earlier this week, Congressman Kinzinger was deployed to the U.S.-Mexico border with his Air National Guard unit, and he is serving on active duty in his capacity as a lieutenant colonel. And his previous border missions while elected. The congressman will stay within the United States, the Illinois Republicans' office said in the statement. So just wanted to, give that a little bit of recognition, regardless of political sides. I'm not even sure if I think he's Republican. I've seen the guy around. Yeah, out of Illinois. He's a Republican, Republican from Illinois. But regardless of all that, right? He's going to the border. He's taking part in what we have going on, folks. That's so we salute you, Adam. Godspeed, brother. All right. So come over here to Operation Disclosure. Check this out here from time to time. This is where I'll get the RV intelligence alerts. Sometimes I read them, sometimes I don't. Again, it's just a collective, the disclaimer they put. Again, folks, when you're in the intelligence gathering, when you're looking for truth, when you're in that field, which you guys should be, you're following along with us. We read lots of stuff, all right? Some of it I read, and it's in one ear, out the other. I don't even bring it to you. So I'm doing a lot of that pre. And then when I bring different articles, again, you're going to make your own conclusions. You're always going to think for yourself. We're going to read lots of things. Some of it is just a collective based off intelligence leaks or just many different other ways that things are collected, all right? So keep that in mind. Think for yourself, do for yourself, connect your own dots. Come to your own conclusions that only you can come to. All right, I wanted to read this one here, but I was looking down. And boom, look at this. The Patriot Hour Q, they have zero control now. She lost TruthWorks. They, from time to time, I've come across where they pick us up over here and they post our video links, which is perfectly fine. That's what we want. So here we go. Central bankers are money swindlers. Knowledge is power. Central bankers are money swindlers. Money system deliberately destroyed. How this monetary system works. A society is as sound as its currency. The solution is simple. Public awareness. Knowledge is power. The source of this came from Final Wake Up Call. Our time is worth no more today than half a century ago. The average working person has made zero wage gains in his entire 48-year period in the labor market. Since the new fiat currency was introduced in 1971, it is known that the real hourly wage are no higher than they were in the mid-1970s. Then again, the figures indicate that the period of zero growth reaches back to 1971, as the fraudulently precise figures of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, BLS, show annual real wage gains of 0.01%. That's 1/100%. In other words, nothing. That makes this fact of non-progress, which we should be concerned about. Most people have only one commodity, which is their time. They sell it by the hour, by the week, or by the month. The Figures show that their time is worth no more today than it was nearly half a century ago. Don't hold your breath, lest this be proven false. How could this be possible? How could centuries of progress from the depths of the Middle Ages to the era of Nixon administration suddenly come to an end, just when things seemed to be most promising? Today there are far more people with PhDs, more engineers, more people with a master's degree, more patents, more technology, and more well-educated people all over the world. All of them striving, straining, and stressing out over how to make their time more valuable. How could our progress have failed so spectacularly? The same vehicle. But it's even worse than the numbers suggest. Firstly, the given numbers are averages, so the high wages of the few pull up the averages of the low wages of many. Secondly, instead of looking at the money with the phony statistic adjustments, it is more correct to look at the time. In 1971, one could buy a middle-class utility vehicle, UV, for about $2,500 at the $4 per hour loan. It took 625 hours to buy that car. Today's comparable models are $30,000, and the average hourly wage is $26,000. Now the average wage earner has to work 1,154 hours to pay for his middle-class UV. Putting it another way, it takes him almost twice as much as his time to pay for the car. But wait, says the central banker, the car today is not the same as the one from 1971. Technology has improved. This new one has GPS, Bluetooth, and seat warmers. Therefore, you're getting twice as much in value. Indeed, technology has improved, but the car is not twice as good as it was back then, while the fundamental task of the car is still the same. In both cases, it moves you and your stuff from point A to point B, with or without the luxury extras. The simple fact is, you need the UV car, which now costs $30,000. So financial nonsense system. Thirdly, since the central banks have discouraged savings with their artificially low interest rates, as well as general increase in the cost of living, the buyer is not likely to have $30,000 on hand. So he is forced to borrow a loan with interest that then becomes part of the financialized economy, to be sliced and diced, leveraged, and hypothecated until the money the shufflers earn more on the loan. So what they do with that, we know that all these loans are sold and people buy into them. It's a real crazy system, folks. So then the car manufacturer did, the money shufflers earn more on the loan than the car manufacturer did on the automobile. So the not too wealthy working man is not only forced to sell twice as much of his time to buy a car, his time has now become an asset, underlying not only car manufacturers but also the banksters. And here's the weak link in the entire senseless and distorted financial system. All this has spawned into the existence on a limited asset of declining value. The financial industry loans to the working man is 5.5% on a loan of the $30,000 car. This gives the lender a gross profit of $5,290. This leaves the poor man paying $490 a month, equal to 19 hours of work for 6 years. Altogether, the fellow would be forced to work about 1,356 hours over a 6-year period to get more or less the same automobile he would have been able to purchase for 625 hours of his time in 1971. The same is going on with housing. The same calculation mutatis can be applied to the housing. So this whole system is the same. The average man paid about $24,000 for the average house in 71. Today he pays about $371,000 priced in time. The house cost 6,000 hours in 1971 and 14,269 hours today. Is that progress? Not in most people's imagination. Time is life. It is the only commodity most people have. It takes more than 7 years of work for the average person to buy the average house today. 4 more years than it took in 1971. So, the globalization. So what happened? The simple answer, thanks to the strive for globalization and the WTO, A huge supply of time flooded the market. Approximately 1 billion people from China, India, Southeast Asia are willing to work for $1 to $5 a day, and they have entered the world economy. Consequently, the competition has lowered the gross value of time. And all this has set the stage for President Donald J. Trump, who argues that the U.S. needs to build a wall and start implementing tariffs to keep these people and their products out. In all honesty, it is not that simple. You don't get richer by shutting out people who can produce goods faster, cheaper, or better than you. You get richer by doing what you do better and trading that for something which someone else does better. Also, cheap foreign labor should push down the cost of goods and services imported from overseas, even as his own wages did not increase. The average working man should have seen an increase in his real standard of living adjusted for inflation. Real wages should have gone up. But that didn't happen either because something else was going on. The proverbial swamp was growing. The economy was becoming less productive and more financialized, full of parasites, cronies, zombies, pawns, lackeys, and financial hustlers. The insiders and the rich navigated through the swamp and continued to make money. But the typical working individuals, the outsiders, went down in the central bank's Main Street economy. Now it has become more clear why central bankers were forced to inflate the world's money supply at an unprecedented pace. Never before since the entire world's monetary system become completely unhinged from both gold and the real interest rates has so much money been created out of thin air. Monetary theorists believe these manipulations will deliver the benefits of the free market, wealth, abundance, and a multitude of other advantages without any cost in savings, investment, labor, and real interest compensation. Nonsense, of course. So the money system deliberately destroyed. The world's money system is being deliberately destroyed, and so too are the monetary signals that guide the markets, which in free market are supposed to be represent the supply and demand decisions of billions of people. Accordingly, all signals have become totally fake, phony, and false. All right, despite frequent denials, these distortions in the markets are the result of intentional manipulations of currency values around the world by central bankers, crafted in response to the demand for competing export opportunities, easy money and cheaper credit by governments. The world has been indoctrinated into believing that the fiat paper money is a symbol of wealth and can deliver all the benefits of the free market. This just isn't true. The central truth of the economics is based on scarcity. There can never be enough of anything to satisfy anyone. The central truth of politics is patronage, promising to give everything to everyone. Paper money is the bridge between economics and politics. The huge sums of money being printed in Europe, Japan, and the U.S. are hindering any chance of market-determined exchange rates. All governments worldwide have a debt burden so high they can only hope to inflate their way out, which won't be possible either. The whole world is in the midst of a global currency war. It's become a Madame's currency race to the bottom. The fabric of society is being destroyed. Across Europe, greed and corruption is destroying the fabric of society, whether it's political, financial, corporate, match fixing in European football, or widespread political bribery in Spain. The privileged have been plundering the nation's wealth for too long. Politicians, banksters, and corporate bosses have lost all credibility, and trust are so utterly rotten to the core that there has to be a total change of both of the people in charge of the system itself. All the money stolen by the banksters and politicians should be returned. The physical protective shield of amnesty should be abolished. Politicians and banksters must be convicted of the fraud or illegal activities and should face prison sentences. All that being perpetuated or purported to the public are great lies. This will hopefully prove to have been the final delusion of the modern times. Watching this tragedy unfold is alarming, regarding both involved and pushing the mass deception, as well as a painful awakening process of the masses living in blissful ignorance. Even the stimulus programs are as also the global warming nonsense, are all lies. Unnecessary increasing taxes to further rob people of their money and curb their freedoms. Governments act like the convicted hedge fund scammer Bernie Madoff with his Ponzi swindling scheme. He too used fresh money to create the illusion of returns for existing clients. There is no way for governments to comply with their commitments without continuously increasing payroll taxes and inflating the money supply. So folks, we know that it's like when you borrow some money from a buddy or somebody else, they earned it and they're kind of going to be without it. Hey, I need to borrow $100, Chuck. And Chuck's like, oh man, when are you going to pay me back? And give me 1 week, next Friday, and I'll give you an extra $20. And everyone's like, okay, they're going to make a little, they're going to be without it for a week. They're going to be worried, but you pay your buddy back, hopefully, and you give him this extra 20. All right. He's a loan shark for the week. Now when we go to borrow from our Fed, which in turn just turns to our treasury and says, yeah, print it. They're not reaching into their own pockets and being without. They're not getting to these rich international bankers and saying, all right, guys, the U.S. needs to borrow a couple trill. And they all pitch in and they're all without. Well, how much are you going to pay us back? They literally say, okay, we'll create it. And they create it on the fly. And at the exact same time, they create the debt with it. Just made up. Well, by the way, you owe us this amount back. So the more they can push out for us to borrow, I mean, you guys understand it. It's just, all right, then we're getting down close to the end here. Many serial liars, many of the world leaders do what they do best. They lie. They are serial liars. They support wealth and power and are beholden to the powerful money-eyed interest. They are guided by instructions of the elite. They sponsor popular sentiments by saying it is time to distribute the wealth to all around the world and time to have more freedom. This is a claptrap and plain socialism. Socialism and individual freedom cannot seem to go together. Socialism is in fact a major threat to freedom. We've gone over this, folks. It's not even something that should be allowed to be discussed in the U.S. So as a Tocqueville maintained, there is irreconcilable conflict between democracy and socialism. Government cannot guarantee any benefit or service without first taking it from someone else. That's why the promise of socialism is merely the promise of plunder. The nation as a whole cannot become wealthy through the plunder of its own citizens. The Rothschilds own almost all central banks of the world. The shareholders are private banks also owned by the Rothschilds and their bankster cronies, while governments don't own any of these shares. How this monetary system works. Here's how the system works. When the government is short of funds, the Treasury issues bonds and delivers the bonds to the dealers, which auction them off, while the central banks want to expand the money supply, creating more money. They step in, they buy the bonds from these dealers with newly issued paper currency acquired for the cost of writing them into an account on a computer screen. The maneuvers are called open market operations because the central banks buy bonds on the open market from the bond dealers. The bonds then become the reserves that the banking establishment uses to back its loans. And another sleight of hand, skillful deception known as fractional reserve. Lending the same reserves are lent many times over, further expanding the money supply, generating interest for the banks with each loan. The central banks generate profits from their shareholders, the interest on the bonds acquired with the newly issued central bank notes, pays for the central bank's operating expenses, plus a guaranteed 6% return to its shareholders. A mere 6% a year may not be considered a profit in the world of Wall Street high finance, but most businesses that manage to cover all their expenses and give their shareholders a guaranteed 6% return are considered for-profit corporations. In addition to this 6% guaranteed 6%, the banks will now be getting interest payments on their reserves which ultimately come from the taxpayer. The basic reserve requirement set by the Federal Reserve is 10%. This 10% held in reserve can be fanned into 10 times the sum in loans. That means 10,000 in the reserves becomes 100,000 in loans. Unbelievable. All right, a couple more little. A society is as sound as its currency. In other words, via the government, taxpayers pay for the interest to the banks so they can retain the reserves to accumulate interest on 10 times the sum in loans. Plainly expressed, the banks earn these returns off the backs of the taxpayers. With these manipulations, the ECB earned, according to their own statements, nearly 1 billion euros over the year of 2012. The whole system has become rife with corruption. It degrades the very concept of money. This relates to why kids don't save coins in piggy banks anymore. It's because they're no longer coins with value. They're just tokens that are constantly depreciating and essentially are worthless. All of the society is about as sound as its currency. The solution is simple. If the central banks were actually a government agency, the governments could issue the country's legal tender directly, avoiding the unnecessary interest-bearing debts to private middlemen who created the money out of thin air themselves. That's what I just went over. It could lend the full faith and the credit of the country to the state and to the local governments interest-free, cutting the cost of the running expense in half, restoring the thriving local economies of earlier decades. All of our actions should be based on logical thinking. We have to rebuild everything in our society, to begin with changing today's central bank economy into people's economy, where the people are in control of the government. This is part of the Q plan that was devised many years ago before Trump was even elected. In this mega plan, the Chinese, Russia, and many individuals and organizations are involved. The Federal Reserve Central Bank is now under Trump's control. There will be no recession in 2020. President Trump will be reelected. Once everything is put in place, only then will the hammer fall. In the second term of his presidency, the economy will improve. The deep state will not be able to compete in the 2020 election. The plan is incredible. Masterminded, military planned, operation at its very best. People will soon have money backed by real assets. Money with real purchasing power that will go much further than today's fiat money. Even in Europe, Matteo Salvini, the outspoken head of the anti-immigrant League Party in Italy, said the Central Bank of Italy and Consab, the country's stock market regulator, should be reduced to zero. In other words, eliminated. And that the fraudsters who inflicted losses on the Italian savers should end up in prison for a very long time. This is one heck of an article. This is the last one, though. Public awareness. One thing is of enormous importance at all costs. We, the people, must make absolute sure that never, ever, ever again the central bank is able to come back. This will not happen immediately, but much later in the future. There could be a chance that we, as a people, maybe have to face an ordeal like this again. There will always be crooks around that will try to come back and do their job to get their power, grab for power. Because if this is a real possibility, we, the people, must be fully educated about all the ins and outs. I add transparency and all these other things here, folks, that have happened in the past pertaining to this. We have an obligation to educate ourselves, our children, and their children about the evil central banks and the criminal deep state practices. It is really important to muster sufficient knowledge and have understanding about this money swindle that has been allowed to go on for centuries because of our ignorance. Once it is clearly understood how these manipulations have been so successful, it'll be time to come into action, to participate in the rebuilding of our own society. We must prevent such a blatant swindle from ever happening again in the future. We must take advantage of the vast and thorough research that has been done over the last decennia to uncover this fraud and many other swindles that have taken place over centuries. Every responsible adult has an obligation to participate in the reconstruction process of society by addressing all the criminal activities that have been going on for far too long. Become knowledgeable and never forget. Easy money printing made politicians and people in charge corrupt. People are encouraged to read and study the instructive guide, especially compiled for this very purpose. Here's part 1 and part 2 of the thorough research book, The Great Awakening, with many detailed cases in the point and solutions that are complemented with countless links for very in-depth research. All this information is important and necessary to fully grasp in order to structure and implement the effective necessary changes. Only then can we guarantee the total destruction of these criminal malpractices and prevent them from ever resurfacing and being freed of corruption. Let me click on this here. The Great Awakening. All right, so they got a book here. Part 1. There's a part 2. All right, so we gave a little shout out to the article here. I don't know if there was somebody that had a name up here. I will leave this link down below. Let's see here. Get to the top. That was kind of a long one. We're at 26 minutes in. I don't really see. The source is from Final Wake Up Call. So very, very interesting, folks. Let me see here. Judge rules that Manafort deliberately lied to Mueller team during cooperation. So that's breaking news right now. So again, you can do this on the QMAP, central banks. And we got these early posts from back in 17, about 3 weeks after the Q started. Central banks. Rothschild owned and controlled central banks, folks, all right? They're everywhere. Afghanistan, Bank of Afghanistan. I mean, sometimes they're called central right out in the open. Other times they're just called bank of. But these are central banks. And they're everywhere, all right? We got four drops going over all of them. And the last one I like to always point out is interesting right here. The Fed and the IRS. Fact, U.S. Federal Reserve is a privately owned company, sitting on its very own patch of land, immune to U.S. laws. Q. Think Bridge, Google, Facebook, Central Algorithm. Anything you can say on Deutsche Bank, fake news. The plan to have the Fed raise the rates, steep incline, beginning in March of 19 in an effort to kill the economy prior to the 2020 election. This is all known and planned for. Structure change is coming. So if you remember, we got the gold. Do we have the gold? Yes. Gold shall destroy the Fed. Gold. All right, we'll shut this one down. We're at the 28-minute mark. Again, thanks for joining in. I'm Mike. This is a Patriot Hour. God bless, Godspeed each and every one of you worldwide. We'll be back here later on, probably this evening, or if not, first thing tomorrow. Again, make sure you subscribe, like, share, comment. Take a look in the description box for all the links, all the articles, and make sure you leave a comment down below. Other than looking around, drop a comment. All right, we'll see you back here real soon on the next Patriot Hour.